Hello, my name is Isaac and welcome to the Green Left Show. Today we've got an awesome interview with public housing activist and tenant Karyn Brown. And Karyn's been involved in the campaign to save Waterloo and Waterloo South public housing for almost a decade. We discussed the New South Wales Labor government's plans to push ahead with these demolitions, the impact of the forced evictions that tear communities apart, and how residents are resisting. We also discuss some of the best solutions to the housing crisis. This episode was recorded on stolen Gadigal land that always was and always will be Aboriginal land. This land was never ceded, and Green Left pledges to stand with First Nations people in campaigns for justice, sovereignty and land rights. If you like the work we do, you can become a supporter from as little as $5 a month. Just head to greenleft.org.au/support to sign up. It's the best way to both support our content and to make sure that you receive all of it. Now, I started by asking Karyn about the latest updates in the campaign to defend the Waterloo public housing estates.
From our end, we're still fighting it, but the people who have got the letters, there's about 150 people. There's 150 units that are going to be vacated. Some of them are already empty, so there's a few less. They're a bit, the people there who I know have said, like, I was expecting it, but now that it's come, it's really a bit of a shock, and they're a bit confused about where they're going to go and who their landlord's going to be, because there's just nowhere for it to go. So, and that's part of our campaign too, saying, well, why are you tearing down these houses, moving these people out, tearing down their homes when there's no homes for people who are already homeless? We're already housed, so rather than unhousing us, concentrate on housing the people who need housing. And that includes people with full-time jobs. There are homeless people with full-time jobs or 2 or 3 jobs. So if they can't find somewhere to live, I think it's a bit ridiculous, really, to it's worse than ridiculous to move people out of homes, to demolish any homes. To be honest, it's stupid. First of all, build some. That's what I think. They keep saying they've got plenty of land, the government, but they keep on giving it to developers who want to make profit. That's what they do. That's their job. So you can't blame them for that. But the government doesn't have to keep giving them land, because they're not going to solve any housing problems. They're not going to bring prices down, which is a kind of myth that goes around, that supply will bring down prices. But developers are not going to do anything to bring down prices, because that will cut into their profit. In fact, they need to increase prices because costs have increased. And so the difference between this government and the last one, they said where it was previously 30% social housing, the new government said it's now 50% social and affordable. No one knows what affordable is, really.
Now, could you explain some of the differences between terms like public housing, social housing, community housing and affordable housing?
Okay, so social housing covers public housing and community housing. Public housing is owned by the government and run by the government. Community housing is private. It is usually owned, sometimes owned by the government, but always run by not-for-profit agencies, but they are private. Any rent you pay to them goes to them, whereas if you're in public housing, you pay rent to the government, so they can keep using that for public housing and for public benefits. The community housing providers, if you're a tenant with them and you're on any Centrelink payment, then you'll get Commonwealth rent assistance from the federal government. You'll also get that if you're on any Centrelink payment and you rent from a private landlord, you'll also get that. So all landlords except the state government receive Commonwealth rent assistance from the federal government. People in public housing do not get that. So there's less money, if you like, to spend on repairs and maintenance and improvements, which is the advantage that community housing has at the moment, that they say, oh, we're much better at maintenance and stuff. That is because they've got more money. But the thing is, with that, there's no guarantee that the Commonwealth Rent Assistance will always be there, that I can see. It's one of those things that a future government might see a benefit in cutting, because it's generally, when they want to cut things from the budget, it's usually from the poor, the lower income end of society. So that could be one way to go. If that happens, then they'll be in the same boat as public housing. So that's the difference. Affordable housing, I don't really know. I don't know the eligibility for it. I don't know how you get it, and I don't know the rent. The most common thing I've heard is that it's 80% of market rent, or like 79 point something cents of market rent. So in Sydney, that's not affordable anyway.
What promises did New South Wales Labor make at the last election?
They said, vote for us, we'll save you. Only we can save your homes. Pretty much, they sent us all a text message the night before the election. Prior to that, they'd said that many times. The local member, Ron Honig, the local member for Heffron, had said it in Parliament that it shouldn't be demolished. He was filmed walking down the street saying, we've just spent millions of dollars fixing these roofs, these gutters, why would we knock them down? All of those videos, I can't find them anymore. They seem to have disappeared. And then after the election, they kind of said, oh no, it'll cost us too much to get out of the contract. It was, words like that. So we'll just have to press on with it. There is still no contract, though. We've just discovered that even though people have been given eviction notices, that there is still no contract signed with the developer. So there is no reason to go ahead with it. And they pretty much across the board, they said that they will stop selling off and privatising public housing, and they continue to do it. They're doing it all over the place with public housing. I don't know if they intend to get rid of it completely, because there are people who are in a bind now. The people who are being, evicted, I call it. They call it relocated. So you can go to a community housing provider. You don't know anything about them. Everyone's got different landlords. When the government's everyone's landlord, it's a bit easier to manage. It's a bit easier to deal with and find things out about how things work. And there's also things like how much room you have in your current unit. If you've got a spare room, say, some people need that for various reasons, for health, security, whatever. If you move to a community housing provider, then I've heard that you cannot have a spare room. Okay, that's just their rules. But then all community housing providers are a bit different. Also, people are worried about, can they have pets? If they have one already, or can they get one later? Things like that.
It's been almost 10 years that the state government has been planning to demolish public housing at Waterloo. Now, it's been such an inspiring campaign of resistance by residents to withhold from this demolition for so long. But what impact has this had on the residents?
A lot of people are quite nervous. There's still quite a few who are in denial, who are just like hoping that it just stops, because it's kind of happened before. They've said, oh, we're going to do this, and nothing happened, but this seems to be going ahead. They just don't know. And even there's been people, as you said, it's been going for nearly 10 years, and people have sort of, in the last few years, say they kind of, especially after the Labor got elected and then turned around and broke their promise and said, no, it's still going ahead, started looking around for where they might live, found maybe, some public housing they knew about, where they'd seen it before, or they knew someone and they thought, yeah, well, I could move there, I wouldn't mind living there. But then it turns out that they're going to be demolished as well. So I guess that's a real problem. That they said people can stay in the area, but there's not really anywhere in the area that we know of. They keep on telling us about these places that aren't actually built yet. And still, like I said, 150 households got their eviction letters. That leaves 600 who still haven't, and no one knows who the next stage is going to be. So it leaves you like, maybe you want a new lounge or something like that because your old one's falling apart, but what if it doesn't fit in the new place? We don't know if they'll pay to sort that out for you. They've said they'll pay for like Wi-Fi, electricity, etc. connections, and for moving costs, but not about how your old furniture fits into a new place, especially if they're going to take a bedroom off you. And yeah, again about the pets. And I don't know, I think people even are a bit worried about planning holidays, like you might want to book a year for next year sometime, but you never know, you might get a letter while you're away.
There are so many impacts of these forced evictions, communities being torn apart, and also hundreds of tiny practicalities that need to be worked out.
That's the thing they don't really mention. It's like, okay, when you talk to the relocation officer or whatever they're called, you can tell them all the things you need, but people probably can't think of everything all at once for a start. And I don't know if you're allowed to change it later, but you need letters from your doctor. But there is that thing of like support from your neighbours, which you probably don't even notice. You do it for each other, just real basic stuff. But when everyone's split up, then you won't have your neighbours to do it. So I don't know, if you're lucky, you'll have to get NDIS or My Aged Care, which takes ages. If you've got a neighbour who does your shopping for you, I know you can do it online, but some people can't. But, if you've got a neighbour who will take you to the shops even, or do your shopping for you, and then you don't have that neighbour, then you're going to have to get, My Aged Care to do stuff like that for you. That takes ages to apply for. I know, I've done it for my mother. And NDIS as well. Also, I did that for someone. It took at least a year. And it's also going to cost the government a lot more money. So while they seem to think they're getting this a few new social housing units. Okay, so in Waterloo it's about 100. It might be a few more, but quite likely we don't know. There's no plan yet. There's no contract. There's no DA, so we don't know actually what they're going to build. Except there's supposed to be 30%. But one of the earlier plans, there was 30% social housing, but that was only 26% of the floor space. So there's 30% of the front doors, can I say, but not 30% of the space, not 30% of the bedrooms. So they can say they can build all one-bedroom units for all we know, and it will still be 30% social housing. And, they might be new, but that means, as you said, people will have to move out to the suburbs, especially people with families, because they'll need 3-4 bedrooms, or and and the problem with that is there's lots of kids who grow up in public housing in the inner city. They're the ones who work at your McDonald's and stuff in the city and do all these crappy jobs, and even adults as well. If they got kids at school, they need part-time jobs. They're not great jobs. You're not getting great pay, and they can be like short multiple shifts, and people aren't going to want to catch the train for 2 hours for a 4-hour shift. So they're going to run out of workers to do the shit-kicker jobs. You need somewhere for them to live if you want people to do those jobs for you. And, you know, I'm sorry if you don't want to live next door to a cleaner. Well, just leave the big affordable suburbs as they are, which is what Waterloo is. It's kind of used to be an affordable suburb. It's getting less and less so. There's a lot of student housing going up in the area now, and there's planning on more. And that brings you a different kind of shopping retail experience, which is not relevant to the people who already live there. There's really a lot of mixed martial arts places that have opened up lately. Every time something closes, it seems to be that or a tobacconist. So, and yeah, all the cheap bakeries and all the $2 shops, and most of them have all gone. So there's that kind of thing as well. I mean, there are sort of supermarkets not too far that you can get to by bus, because we do have buses. We have very good public transport there, which is kind of why it's too good for us.
In Victoria, the state Labor government is planning to demolish 44 public housing towers. Now, despite promises that it would do so, it's been revealed that it is not including any public housing in some of these sites as they're redeveloped. Does this erode trust in the plans for the sites at Waterloo and Waterloo South?
Well, yeah, the government can still change it. They can still stop it. But they've also said, you know, all public land, all developments on public land will have some social housing. Not public even, they won't even go that far, but still, it's not true. There's a site on Parramatta Road. It's quite near the hospital and the university. No social housing at all there. And now they say it's for key workers. There's going to be affordable housing for key workers, which is like nurses, police, teachers, is what they always say. But there's nowhere for the cleaners and the hospital orderlies and, I don't know, Uber drivers, just all the people who do all the stuff so that the key workers can get on with their jobs are not being provided for when it comes to housing. Because as it stands at the moment, anyone with a job can't really get into public housing. So, and they can't afford to rent privately, so they're the ones who are homeless. You know, and that's, I really just think that they should just forget about the money, like completely put money out of the equation. Just have a look at who needs housing and where we can build it and build it. I mean, the fish market sites, for example, apparently someone there's gone broke, the actual builders rather than the developers. So, I don't know, the government could just go build things there, you know, and people could live in it. It's like, just build what people need. That's what they should be doing. And if you think about it, like, it's like, you know, there was COVID and then there's just been ex-cyclone or whatever. And they go, it's a disaster, so we don't count the pennies, we just spend what we need to. Housing is a disaster, so just spend what you need to and fix it, which is what you do with a disaster. And in the meantime, stop demolishing. There's, you know, it's pretty well documented recently that there's a shortage of labour, so let's use that labour to build stuff instead of using it to demolish stuff. And, you know, let's like keep the carbon in the buildings instead of sending it back to the air and making more.
Now, everyone is feeling the pinch of the housing crisis, with both rents and house prices skyrocketing. Is public housing the solution?
Well, it is a solution, and they continue to treat it as a problem, which is rather bizarre, actually. You can do it with anything, really. Look for the negatives. Like, you can go, oh, you know, what's wrong with public housing? And you can find some things that are wrong. But they never go, oh, what's good about it? Never, you know. It's like...
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, they're pretty rude about the people who live there, to be honest. And then they'll turn around and say, oh, if we call it social housing, we're reducing the stigma. When the stigma is caused by them saying stuff like that, like by them saying, oh, all the people in public housing are sort of dole bludgers and criminals and drug addicts and social experiment that failed. and yeah, they can go, oh yeah, the buildings, the roofs are leaking and stuff. Well, fix them, So there's a whole lot of roofs that aren't leaking as well. And the thing is that we've been told for years, and we've been doing it as individuals, reduce, reuse, recycle, So we stopped using plastic bags. We stopped throwing them in the bin, so stop throwing buildings in the bin. You can't recycle any of the materials unless you leave them where they are. So even if you gutted those buildings and built around them and made them bigger and put lifts and things in to make them accessible, which is not that urgent, by the way. I mean, that's one of their reasons. They say, oh, every unit should be accessible to a wheelchair. Yes, that's a great idea, but you're not going to do it to every building in the world straight away, are you? So what they could do there is just, for a start, modify all the ground floor ones. They've done it to a few anyway, made them wheelchair accessible. Fix them up, put some, add to them, maybe put solar panels on the roofs, some shading just to make them all slightly more efficient when it comes to energy use. And then once they've done that and they've built some more somewhere else, when they've got, the labour and the resources to spare, then they can add on to those existing buildings that have already been fixed up, that have already got solar, and they can put lifts in them, and then they can make all the units accessible like that. But yeah, and it would give us more housing faster anyway, because they are going to take away 749 homes in South Waterloo, and it's going to be, I don't know how long before there's even that many to replace that amount, even that number, let alone any more. Whatever kind of housing it is. And yeah, 50% is unaffordable, so it's not helping anyone really.
How can we build the movement to defend public housing and demand more?
Well, I think we just have to keep on demanding it, really. And look, it would be lovely if we could find some way to legally stop them and protect existing housing that way, and to force them to stick to their binding agreement that they made at the 2023 Labor conference, where they said they would not sell off or privatise anything. That would be great, but apart from that, I think we just have to keep sort of trying to get in the way as much as we can, and to hope that they give up one day. Hope that someone comes along and says, no, I've got a better idea than this absolutely worst idea. Because there has been a lot of people who've come along and said, look, this would be better, this would be better. And pretty much any idea is better. Leaving it how it is even a better idea. Like I said, we're already housed. There's probably 1,000 people in those 749 households. It's probably about 1,000, so that's 1,000 people who are housed, who are not a problem in the housing crisis at the moment. And so leave us alone, I guess. And I think we just have to try harder with the humanness of it, because a lot of it just seems to forget that the people who live in that it's actually about people and their homes, and not about buildings and land and profit and best value and best practice. And it's not, anyway. I mean, this idea of demolishing and rebuilding it with 30% is, they stopped doing it overseas, in sometime in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, when they came up with this idea for Waterloo, they were still doing it overseas, but then they turn around and went, no, it's no good, because they end up with no money. Like, they've lost all the land, and all any money they made out of it has been all spent on taking care of the people they kicked out, which is you know, what's going to happen. Like I said, not just the moving costs, but all the associated costs, that NDIS, my aged care, plus, you know, taxi fares if you move to where there's no buses, or Uber, whatever. It costs more. So it's really not worth it to the government unless the developer is like holding a gun to their head. Then they can just say, no, let's stop it. And we just have to keep on demanding that, I think.
Now, Action for Public Housing have called a Save Waterloo, no evictions, no sell-offs, no demolitions rally on April 12. Can you tell us more about this?
It would be great if people could just come along to that on the 12th. It's at the Redfern Community Centre in Hugo Street, Redfern. It's right near the station if you're on public transport. And just come along, give us support, and help us demand, you know, public housing. Because even if you don't need it yourself now, you might one day, or your kids might, or, you know, your brother or your sister might need it. And if they're going to just... They've let it run down for years. They've given it no money. So I think what we should be demanding is permanent funding. Like in every budget, there should be funding for public housing, just like there is for public health and public education. And we want more public housing, not less. So they should stop selling it, and in fact, they could just buy more, buy it off these, you know, there's builders going broke at the moment, buy it off them, you know, buy them out. This is something that did happen in the 80s, I think. There was a lot of public housing arose because they bought up, you know, they bought builders out who were going broke. So the more people we have demanding that, the better. Write letters to, I don't know, they have just said, like, the federal government and the state government have just, for the first time in decades, really, earmarked money for public housing. So let's see it. Let's see it spent on public housing, not on moving people out of public housing, you know, and let's have it fixing public housing that's there, because people need that security, you know. Public housing is it's for people who will probably never be able to afford a house, but they should be able to have that security. And, you know, just because you've got a job also, you shouldn't have to be at the mercy of private landlords for the rest of your life. Because, as you know, rents have been going up like $200 a week in one go. And then people end up homeless because of that. So what we need is massively expanded public housing, and there's no reason we can't have it. Like, cities all over the world have, you know, 50% public housing. I don't need to name them, Vienna's one, but it can be done. And because there's that much of public housing, it doesn't mean it's only like people on age pensions and disability pensions who live in it. It means all sorts of people can live in it, and that makes it like a very diverse community. Whereas when you have your rich, you know, unaffordable housing, that's a very narrow section of society, and it's very sort of closed off. And it's quite interesting that they don't call that a ghetto, but they do call, you know, a lot of public housing in one place a ghetto. And on that, they one of their things, they've been very insulting about Waterloo. You know, they've said, oh, we have to clean it up, there's all drug addicts and they're all dole bludgers, etc. They said that if we live next door to people with jobs, we might be inspired to get jobs, basically, things like that. Most people I know in public housing work, or have, you know, worked when they were younger, you know. So and as I said before, they should be looking at what's good about it. And the really good thing about large public housing estates like Waterloo is that because those people who really do need the support do get it. It's not only from their neighbours, but all the services can be more centralised. They go to where the people are instead of having the people having to, you know, negotiate bad public transport to get there, or someone driving around in cars to see this client here, and they can, you know, have a little shop in the middle of the estate where everyone can go one day a week, which we do have. So things like that really work. And just build more, honestly, and buy some stuff. Stop it. The city can't be just taken over by rich people who can buy units that they don't even live in half the time. It's like the developers are like taking over from town planners. Town planners go to university for 4 or 5 years to learn how to do this stuff the best way, and it just doesn't matter because the developers come along and go, no, we want to do it this way because that's how we make money. And governments, all the governments seem to go, oh well, we better let you do it your way because if we don't let you make money, then you won't do it. And I think that's a good thing if they say no, we're not doing it. But the government can start a public works department and get building and get mending and
Any final comments?
Oh look, I'd just say please don't give up. Like, as I said before, you might not need public housing, you might not know anyone who lives in public housing, but one day you will. Either you or one of your family will need public housing, and if it's not there, then they'll be homeless. So please don't give up. Keep demanding it. We need it all over the place, and we need to keep telling the government that they need to spend money on it. That we deserve it. It's a human right. Everyone needs to be housed, and it's their job to do it because no one else is going to.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Green Left Show. Details about the Save Waterloo protest are available in the description below. Also available is a link to get involved with Action for Public Housing. And as I said at the beginning, if you like the work we do, please consider becoming a supporter. It's just $5 a month and makes a huge difference to allow us to continue producing content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Green Left Show.